Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is a special holiday edition of Levin TV, and our focus is on the Supreme Court. Even before the decision in Dobbs overturning Roe v. Wade, Schumer and the Democrats were trashing the Supreme Court, trying to figure out how to pack it with left-wingers, trying to destroy its independence. So the court is under attack. It's under attack by their media mouths, too. Well, we come to their defense. Let's take a look. Go.
This is where freedom rings.
If you believe in America, if you believe in the Constitution empowers us. It's a new day. America's back. America's back, and America's going to get strong again. We're going to defend America, and we're going to defend our interests.
Liberty's voice, Levin TV.
The attack on our culture continues, as it did last evening when this was leaked by somebody to Politico. A early draft, February 10, 2022, that's the date, from Justice Alito to all the other justices, all of them. First draft, it says at the top, Thomas E. Dobbs, State Health Officer of the Mississippi Department of Health et al. Petitioners versus Jackson Women's Health Organization et al. So this comes out of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and this is the Mississippi abortion case. And in the opinion, Justice Alito, writing for 5 of the other justices, and by the way, the justices don't agree, all 5, on every aspect. They concur in certain respects, but you have a majority to overturn Roe versus Wade and related cases. Now, why was this leaked? It's pretty obvious. It's leaked from somebody who is pro-abortion, somebody who wanted to create a political firestorm, somebody who wants Congress to act and to enshrine abortion on demand in our statutes, and somebody who wants this to be an election issue in November. Now, you might say, be an election issue anyway, because the court would have to release it in June. Yes, but the court does things for a reason. It would probably be the last opinion it releases. The justices would have been gone. So there wouldn't be 3-4 months of hype. It's May, so June. So it wouldn't be released probably for 6-7 weeks. So now we'll have 6 or 7 weeks of this, right? 6 or 7 more weeks of it than we otherwise would have had. But there's a bigger picture here that I want to talk about, a couple of them actually. Here is Politico with the Hunter Biden story. Headline, Hunter Biden story is Russian disinfo, dozens of former intel officials say. What Politico was doing, and the rest of the media for the most part were doing, was covering up for Joe Biden by refusing to report the story accurately and substantively on the Hunter Biden laptop. Attacking the New York Post, which was reporting the story, attacking Fox, which was reporting the story, and of course attacking conservative talk radio, any outlet that was actually using the information in the laptop. So Politico did everything it could to cover it up and to censor it. New York Times did, Washington Post did. And then this is leaked to Politico. Now, Politico didn't censor this, didn't say, you know what, it would be inappropriate to run with that. We don't want to do damage to the institution of the court. Politico couldn't wait to run with headlines on this, and that's exactly what it did. And the headline is, Supreme Court has voted to overturn abortion rights, draft opinion shows. So the headline is wrong, but it's intended to be hyped by Politico. So Politico, number one, covered up one story, the Biden laptop, lied about another story, Russia collusion, like the rest of the media, and then ran with this leak immediately. So Politico has clearly significant responsibility for damaging the institution of the Supreme Court. This leaker, whether it's somebody who was involved in the printing process, or a law clerk, or an associate justice, giving the AOK to a law clerk, or an associate justice to whomever the leaker is going to become iconic and celebrated by the left. If they have a law license, they will lose their law license, but they won't care. They'll make a fortune writing a book or 2 or 5. They will be celebrated by these left-wing organizations that will make sure they're taken care of. They'll get speeches for $50,000 to $100,000. They'll get kiss-up TV shows because that's the way our media are. Our media are completely corrupt and one-sided. So you'll see them on like these shows Sunday morning on CBS, you know, with the birds in the backgrounds and the creek, you hear the water, and Ernie Grabotsky or whomever it is the leaker, stood up for women and women's rights against a Supreme Court that doesn't look like America. You know, that sort of, with a majority of men making decisions about women's choices. I can see it now. So this person may have a problem when it comes to a law license if they're a lawyer, but it's not a problem in the sense that they will become famous, infamous. And I'm convinced they're going to be celebrated. Now, why am I convinced of that? Because of the reaction of the Democrats and the left right now, celebrating the leak, some of them openly, trying to exploit it for political purposes, because that's all they care about in the United States of the Democrat Party. They don't care if the Supreme Court burns down as long as they're the ones doing it, as long as it gets them the result that they want. And speaking of burned down, a pro-life think tank was firebombed in Madison, Wisconsin. ABC News didn't even cover it. NBC News did cover it. Let's take a look. Go.
Tonight, a new flashpoint in the battle over abortion rights.
The people, united, will never be defeated.
In Madison, Wisconsin, police say a Molotov cocktail thrown into the headquarters of an anti-abortion group, vandalized with a warning spray painted on a wall. If abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either. And conservative Supreme Court justices facing fury. Protesters outside the D.C. area homes of the court's Chief Justice, John Roberts.
Now, what's interesting about that, apparently Roberts is going to go with the minority on this. So he's not even with the majority. It doesn't matter. Go.
As well as Justice Brett Kavanaugh.
We will not go back.
The Trump nominee promised senators Roe versus Wade was settled precedent to get confirmed to the nation's highest.
No, that's not the way that works. You see, the media are inciting violence too. The media are inciting violence just as they did in the summer of 2020. The Democrats are inciting violence. They think this was the ticket to getting Biden elected, in addition to all the hanky-panky that went on in the election, all the violations of the federal Constitution. This is what they're hoping, that Americans will forget their fate on the border when it comes to prices, coming food shortages, baby formula shortages, big baby formula must be behind it, you know, sort of that kind of thing. Judicial precedent means that a court has issued a ruling that binds the lower courts, the circuit courts and the district courts. And unless that precedent is changed, that precedent is standing. Now, in terms of Roe versus Wade is standing precedent, if a court gets facts or it gets a case that raises questions about the prior case, it's not supposed to ignore it. You notice the media and the Democrats don't argue that Dred Scott was good precedent. Dred Scott enshrined slavery. It helped contribute to a civil war. They don't say Plessy versus Ferguson was good precedent, separate but equal is equal, in the late 1800s. No. We all celebrate Brown versus Board of Education, which more than a half a century later reversed precedent, Plessy versus Ferguson. We don't say Korematsu is precedent, a good decision, when FDR rounded up Japanese Americans and Americans of Japanese descent and put them in concentration camps and took their private property away. Was that precedent? Yes. But it was overruled, overturned. Roe versus Wade isn't even relevant anymore. What do you mean, Mark? I told you about the trimesters, right? I told you about Casey, viability, right? Well, there's a lot of states that have gone off the rails. California, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, other deep, dark states that have gone well beyond it. Well beyond it. And furthermore, all the court is saying here is we have no role. We don't have any role. The Constitution doesn't say anything, so there's nothing for us to interpret. which is the way it's supposed to be. So it's up to the states. The court could have said, at least theoretically, the Equal Protection Clause under the 5th and 14th Amendment applies to those viable babies, right? In which case you cannot have an abortion at a certain date. But they didn't say that. The opinion, believe it or not, was quite modest, but not modest enough if you're a radical. These phonies who claim to stand for women's rights, except when it comes to sports, except when it comes to transgenderism, except when it comes to a Supreme Court nominee who can't define the term woman and won't. They don't stand for women, they stand for abortion. Go.
But now that leaked draft opinion shows Kavanaugh among 5 judges potentially poised to overturn that nearly 50-year precedent. It comes as new polls show nearly 2/3 of Americans want Roe kept in place.
Hold on. It's the Supreme Court of the United States. What do polls have to do with Supreme Court rulings? It's the one institution where polls are irrelevant. They have to make a decision based on the Constitution and the law. What if 2/3 of Americans say you don't have any property rights? What if 2/3 of Americans say they don't believe in due process for criminals? What if 2/3 of Americans say, you know what, that slavery was a good idea way back when? So what? It doesn't matter what they say. The court has to do what the court has to do. So you don't politicize the court by doing something like that. That's number one. Number two, they say they want Roe kept in place. If I were to say, do you support partial birth abortion, where the baby's brain is crushed and then sucked out of its head, and then the baby's pulled out of the womb, I'll bet you 2/3 of Americans would say, no, I don't support that. When you read Woodrow Wilson, who's one of the great and I think most disgusting icons of the left, he said that when real changes are made, they'll be made by the courts. Because the public doesn't support much of what the Democrats want to do. Look how they wanted to transition our country, change our country. They don't even have a majority in the Senate. They have the vice president who breaks ties. They have a 3 or 4 vote majority in the House. They've been trying to fundamentally transform this country with the slightest majorities, even illegitimate in some cases, I would argue. So they always use the permanent bureaucracy. Why do you think Biden's issuing executive orders? They're about as anti-democratic as it gets. When they have a Supreme Court that votes with them, they speed for the gaps. They do everything they can to impose their view. And now they're just trying to scare the hell out of people. Joy Reid is one of the leading racists and homophobes and anti-Semites on television today. The fact that she's still there shocks me. MSNBC and NBC are owned by Comcast. Comcast relies on subscribers, cable subscribers, for its business. It's based in my hometown of Philadelphia, and it really is disgraceful, the reprobates it puts on MSNBC, but she's the worst of the worst. She spews her poison against Sam Alito with her ignorance and her hate. Go.
Good evening, everyone. We begin the readout tonight with the frightening truth about where we are headed post-Roe, as the public outright continues to grow and as protests intensify. Over the weekend, abortion rights protesters demonstrated outside the homes of Justice Brett Kavanaugh and Chief Justice John Roberts.
Now, why are they demonstrating outside Roberts' home when apparently he's going to be part of the 4 minority? It's just amazing. And notice she's all excited about it. Oh, they're protesting in front of their homes. Of course, if they were protesting in front of the homes of the left, they'd all be white supremacists who obviously are insurrectionists, and everybody's part of the Proud Boys and all the other groups, right? No, wrong. Go ahead.
Which even some Democrats joined right-wingers in criticizing.
Oh, right-wingers who criticize them. Does everybody who takes the opposite position of her, is everybody white and a right-winger? What kind of a world does this fool live in? Go ahead.
I mean, I suppose if the justices don't like the First Amendment, they could just drive to another state where the legislature has determined that the constitutional right...
First Amendment, last time I checked, is in the Constitution, you dimwit. Abortion is not. Drive to another state. You think you're funny. You're demonstrating how dumb you are. Go ahead.
It applies, right? I mean, that is what they're telling women to do if they want to control their own bodies, right? But I digress.
No, you always digress. You're right there in the gutter. How about we discuss the viability of the baby? How about we discuss something very, very easy, the last few weeks of the pregnancy? Should we discuss that? No, I digress. Go ahead.
Tonight, I would like to draw your attention to a rather telling footnote in Justice Samuel Alito's treatise on stripping the rights of half our population by overturning Roe.
Stripping the rights of half our population. Does she represent all women in this country? Of course not. Every woman in my life rejects this position. Okay, there's differences of opinion, but why is it assumed that a radical kook like her or a radical kook like Schumer or Pelosi and all the rest of them represent half the country, meaning all the women in this country? It's a lie. But I know who they don't represent. Not a single one of the aborted babies who don't have a vote, who don't have a TV platform, who don't have a lobby on their behalf, because they can't speak. They're dead. Go.
Which caught a bit of online attention this weekend. Now, in this footnote, Alito cites a CDC report from 2008, and it notes, quote, nearly 1 million women were seeking to adopt children in 2002, whereas the domestic supply of infants relinquished at birth or within the first month of life and available to be adopted had become virtually non-existent, unquote. The domestic supply of infants. Well, that line caught some diligent Twittersons as weird, kind of creepy. But in fact, Alito's citation backs up an argument that was pushed by fellow religious ultra-conservative Justice Amy Coney Barrett during her questioning in the Dobbs v. Mississippi case last.
No. They're responding to the likely attack that we hear over and over again from morons like her, which is these are unwanted babies. Unwanted. And Alito is saying, and perhaps other justices are saying, oh, they're wanted. They're wanted by other families, by other women who can't conceive, or they can, but they would like to have adopted children. So these are not unwanted babies. That's why he's saying what he's saying. There's nothing creepy about it. Go ahead.
After Barrett noted that both Roe and Casey emphasize the burdens of parenting and focuses on the consequences of parenting and obligations of motherhood, she asked, why don't the safe haven laws take care of that problem? Safe haven laws, of course, refer to laws in several states that allow people to drop off infants that they don't want at firehouses and police stations and other safe locations without legal consequences like being charged with abandonment. It is, in short, the forced birth adoption option.
It's not a forced birth adoption option. What did the court do here? Did the court rule that abortion is unconstitutional? No. They ruled, we have no say in this. We're agnostic, even maybe atheist. We have no say in this. It's left for the states and the people of the states. However, since we know we're going to be attacked as propagandists and demagogues like her about what if women don't want these children, there are adoption options that are available. And the problem is these justices view this as another life. That's the problem for Joy Reid and the others. They cannot get it through their thick craniums. And so the justices are making arguments saying, hey, look, we can't get involved in this. We might want to, we might like to, but the Constitution does not provide us with a basis for ruling. That said, in response to your likely arguments, women are not required to raise these babies if they don't feel they financially can, or, as the Secretary of Treasury said, they're kind of interfering with their comfort level. And the Secretary of the Treasury decided she would comment on abortion and its contribution to a vibrant economy, particularly among single women. Go.
Secretary Yellen, thank you for being here this morning. Some of your comments in response to Bob's question I found troubling. And I just from a clarity's sake, did you say that ending the life of a child is good for the labor force participation rate? Giving someone the access, let me just quote what you said, that ultimately increasing access to abortion and reproductive health care allows for our labor force participation rate to continue to increase, that denying women access to abortion increases their odds of living in poverty or need for public assistance is a guy who was raised by a single mom who worked long hours to keep us out of poverty. I think people can disagree on the issue of being pro-life or pro-abortion, but in the end, I think framing it in the context of labor force participation it just feels calloused.
Let's stop here. Callous. He's 100% right. This is what the left does. They dehumanize. I've been saying, and I'm going to continue to say, on radio and here and anywhere I can be heard. I'm old enough to remember from time to time PBS or other channels which show the miracle of birth. Have you guys ever seen shows, The Miracle of Birth, where a baby is born? Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen a show on a same channel or a similar channel that has shown partial birth abortion? No? Has anybody here? Well, why is that? If it's a right, if that's not a baby, if it's a choice, if only one person's involved, a mother, why doesn't PBS or the Discovery Channel or one of the other 1,000 channels on cable or Netflix or Hulu, why don't they show us and do a special on abortion, how humane it is, how it's a constitutional privacy right? What's the big deal? Here we have birth, which we see, but they censor it. They don't want you to see. But the baby has to be turned around in the womb after its brain is sucked out of its skull in order to crush the skull. And the baby's turned around in the womb and pulled out feet first. They don't want you to see that. You know why? Because then you'll know it's a baby. You'll see it with your own two eyes. Then they can conduct their polls. That one program would change the debate in this country forever. Forever. It maybe change the minds of people. Because this isn't about Roe versus Wade or Casey, which are, looking back, relatively modest decisions compared to what goes on in some of these states today. Roe sets up a trimester period where even in the third trimester, the state has an interest. That's what it says, on protecting the baby, because the baby can live. It's viable. Casey says, well, actually, the baby can live even longer because science changes over half a century. We have better sonograms, better technology. We now know that babies are in excruciating, horrific pain when they're aborted. We now know that to be the case when their life is ripped from them. And in states like California and New York and others, there's no trimester issue. There's no viability issue. The baby, its life can be eliminated 1 second before birth. So the question of viability isn't even discussed in these states. Go.
Finding a way to have a debate around abortion in a meeting for the economic stability of our country is harsh. And I'm just surprised that we find ways to weave into every facet of our lives such an important and painful reality for so many people, to make it sound like it's just another 0.4% added to our labor force participation as a result of the issue of abortion. Just, to me, seems harsh.
Well, I certainly don't mean to say what I think the effects are in a manner that's harsh. What we're talking about is whether or not women will have the ability to regulate their reproductive situation in ways that will enable them to plan lives that are fulfilling and satisfying for them. And one aspect of a satisfying life is being able to feel that you have the financial resources to raise a child, that the children you bring into the world are wanted. And
let's stop right there. That you have the financial resources to raise a child. What does that mean? There are babies all over this planet. There's babies all over this country where the woman who bore the baby didn't have significant financial resources. My mother's mother had no financial resources. Same with my father's mother. They were born dirt poor. I mean, and they're not alone. My father, as a kid, after school, they'd walk about a mile down the road and he'd work with his mother at a cigar factory till 1 in the morning when he was about 11, 12 years old. We're talking about life here. You do whatever you can for your child. Put aside whatever it is. I don't even know what that means, the financial resources. To what? The wealthiest country on the face of the earth, every excuse, every lame argument that's possible. What Tim Scott goes on to say is, I was raised by a single mother, my brother and I. And thank God that was her attitude. And now I'm a United States Senator. You listen to these arguments. The arguments that they're concocting almost remind me of the arguments for segregation, for slavery in the past. They're not humane. They're not about the individual human being. They act like there's only one person, and it's that person's comfort that matters, the kind of life that they want to lead and so forth. No. I want to read something to you. It's the United States Code, Title 18, Section 1507. It says, whoever, federal statute, federal criminal statute, whoever with the intent of interfering with, obstructing, or impeding the administration of justice, or with the intent of influencing any judge, juror, witness, or court officer in the discharge of his duty, pickets or parades in or near a building housing a court of the United States, or in or near a building or residence occupied or used by such judge, juror, witness, or court officer, or with such intent uses any sound truck or similar device or resorts to any other demonstration in or near any such building or residence, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 1 year or both. Damn it, this Attorney General and this Justice Department are so over the cliff. The penalty is up to 1 year in prison and up to $10,000 for each offense. You have an organization that's organizing demonstrations in front of these homes for the purpose of influencing the outcome of this decision, which hasn't been issued yet. This whole damn thing, you see collusion, it's contrived, and the Attorney General of the United States dare not enforce the law, which he must do under Article 2 of the Constitution, to ensure that the laws of the United States are enforced. He won't do it. But here, we have a federal law to protect judges so they're not intimidated, to protect jurors and witnesses so they're not intimidated, to protect court officers so they're not intimidated. And the Attorney General of the United States is silent, absolutely silent about it. He doesn't need a fake memo produced by the School Boards Association, run through the White House and the Department of Education, and then says, look what I have 3 days later to go after parents. We have a long-standing federal statute about picketing or parading, obstructing or impeding the administration of justice. Where are those prosecutors? Where are those investigators chasing down January 6 people who are merely on the grounds of the Capitol building, charged with parading and trespass, having the books thrown at them, being told that they were obstructing Congress? I'm not talking about the violent people. I'm talking about the nonviolent people. Now you see what's going on in this country. I've never seen anything like this, ever. Meanwhile, around the Supreme Court today, as I speak, you have those tall riot fences, more correctly called anti-riot fences, that they had around the Capitol building. They're now around the Supreme Court of the United States. And the Democrats, to a person at the highest levels, are demanding that their ready-made mob, their permanent mob, come out and, of course, quote-unquote, peacefully protest. And the language that they're using is incendiary. Incendiary. And in my view, it is intended to promote violence. Of course, they'll deny it.
One group, Rise Up for Abortion Rights, made up of high schoolers, maybe even younger than that, many of which came from New York City, are now getting in front of Amy Coney Barrett's house. Here's a tweet with a video from that group saying, just arrived at Amy Coney Barrett's house, dropping off babies, reenacting the American nightmare of forcing girls to give birth against their will. Headed to the Supreme Court, meet us there. Lieutenant Governor, there's images we may show. It's grotesque. It's over the top. It's young girls. It's babies. It's blood. And it's intimidation of a Supreme Court justice. What do you make of all this?
This is our future. I have no words. I have no words.
First of all, they're marching with baby dolls. I'm a little perplexed by this, honestly. If you're marching with baby dolls and you're holding them out, isn't that the opposite of abortion? I guess their perspective is it's an aborted baby. I'm not sure what it is. But there you had, what, a dozen or less marching like that. They had the cameras there, so they knew what they were doing, obviously. And what are they, 15, 16, 14 years old? Go ahead.
These grotesque images that these young girls are carrying. And I wonder, what country am I living in? And what is the mindset? What is the mindset that would cause this to happen? And where are their parents? And then I think to myself, it must be that their parents feel the same and think the same as they do. And don't they realize the irony of this? The reason why you are here is because at some point your mother was pro-choice. And that's why you, my dears, are here. Otherwise, you would not be.
Yeah, they're there because their mothers are pro-choice, pro-abortion. But they're actually there because their mothers went through with the birth, right? They're pro-choice, but in their own lives, at least when it came to these babies who became teenagers, they were pro-birth and pro-life. Go ahead.
They don't see that. I'm telling you, our country is confused, and it's grotesque.
We won't go back! 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 We won't go back!
We are gathered here today because many of us have never been arrested for anything. But this is something that we all care.
Don't they look frightened? They got their hair done and they're smiling and in their best clothes for the cameras. What a pathetic joke. Go ahead.
We will do whatever is necessary to protect people and their bodies, and this is one of the...
You're not protecting people and their bodies. You're not even acknowledging little babies. You're not protecting people and their bodies. And furthermore, if somebody wants an abortion, they'll get an abortion. It's that simple. It's that upsetting. Go ahead.
That we will engage in to make sure that those who have the ability to have control over their bodies and have historically will be able to do so in the future.
You know, you have control over your bodies. You don't have to get pregnant. You don't have to be with a man. May I say man? I think I will. There's a lot of things you can do to avoid getting pregnant. Well, what about an accident, Mark? And what about rape, Mark? We can deal with those, but they're not talking about those. They're talking about abortion right up to the last second. Up to the last second. Now, it doesn't even have to be up to the last second to be viable. You know, Mississippi's law said, and that was the one that was challenged, Mississippi's law said abortion up to 15 weeks. After that, effectively no, unless incest and so forth. And that's what was challenged. And now you have people saying, wow, that's okay, we would have agreed to that, but you didn't agree to that. Now, we still have the most radical abortion laws in the world in places like Colorado, California, New York, New Jersey, and others, which have abortion on demand, meaning you want an abortion, get an abortion, no questions asked. For the radicals, for the Marxists here, they claim that unless you can have abortion right up to the last second, you are controlling their bodies. Ladies and gentlemen, there's two bodies involved here. And the one that hasn't been born yet, they can't speak for themselves. They can't march arm in arm. They can't file briefs. They can't do anything. I want you to think about what it means to abort a virtually fully grown baby in the last month, the last week, the last day, the last minute before birth. I want you to think of what that looks like. They have to kill it in the womb. If they deliver the baby and kill it, it's murder. If the body remains inside the womb, it's not murder. It's the same baby. And that baby feels the excruciating pain of pushing a huge needle into its brain through the soft spot on the top of its head, a syringe. The baby feels it as much as it would feel it outside the womb. And when that syringe is drawn and the brains are removed from the baby's head, you think that's a choice? You think that's humane? I think it's disgusting. The vast majority of the American people oppose that. Where do the Democrats stand? They support it. 49 Democrats voted for that in the Senate of 50. Every Republican voted against it. Even the weak links in the Republican Party said, no, we can't do that. Huge percentage of the American people oppose this. So we really ought to discuss the terms we're talking about. Abortion is a very broad term. It's a very broad term. And for what reason would you abort a baby that late in the pregnancy? It's just appalling. Go ahead. Now look at this. It's a celebration. A celebration of a protest against the Supreme Court and for abortion. Why would you celebrate abortion? Remember when they said, let's make it rare and infrequent? Do you ever hear that phrase anymore, rare and infrequent? Just watch this. Go ahead. Of course, she is not in handcuffs, but she wants you to think she is. Go ahead. Oops, she forgot.
Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is one of more than a dozen Democratic lawmakers arrested in Washington today. They were taking part in an abortion rights protest in front of the Supreme Court.
And just listen how the media plays along with the language, all that. An abortion rights protest. An abortion rights protest. A choice protest. A woman's body protest. There's an awful lot of women who don't agree with these people. An awful lot. And by the way, also notice the language and how schizophrenic these people are. Now we can talk about women's rights and women and women and women. Well, now we have somebody on the Supreme Court who wouldn't define a woman. She needed an expert to help her. But the whole thing is insanity. Go ahead.
We speak with Omar about it in just a moment. But first, Natalie Brand shows us how the arrests come as members of the House are set to vote on a bill that would protect same-sex marriage and interracial marriage.
Now stop there. They're voting on a bill to protect gay marriage and interracial marriage. Those aren't being threatened. Sam Alito in his majority decision explicitly said so. We're not addressing the so-called privacy issue. We're not addressing marriage, same-sex or interracial of any kind. They do not want to engage on the realities of what this court did, which left it to the states, which left it to the legislatures and the people of the states. They do not want to engage in the fact that anybody who actually wants an abortion, even in the last second, can get it. They do not want to engage in the fact that this is more than about a choice, that it's about a baby. They don't want to have real serious discussions. When does life begin? And are you free to end it at any point? None of that. I don't know why AOC, who's accomplished nothing, who hasn't lifted a finger on behalf of this country, who is a media drama birthing person, who is as dumb as they come. I don't know why the media keep promoting her, the phony comics keep promoting her as the face and the voice of the country, if not the Democrat Party. And so she's on there with a late night show with Stephen Colbert not long ago. We've asked AOC to come on all these shows that I do. This one, my Fox show, my radio show. Her answer is always silence. For somebody who has a big mouth and never shuts it, it's amazing. Silence. Go.
The Supreme Court has engaged in the overreaching of its authority in denying the human and civil rights of any pregnant person or person that could become pregnant in the United States of America.
Any pregnant person? Here we go again. We're fighting for women's rights, and pregnant persons, wait a minute. Folks, I don't care if you have what I call a lopectomy. You know what a lopectomy is, Mr. Producer? It's my pedestrian term to explain a medical process. A lopectomy or an I don't know that I can say addictomy, but I did. So that doesn't change your chromosomes. So only a woman, you know, the thing here is this. They believe certain things, or they want to believe certain things, as preposterous as they may be. And then they insist that you identify with what they believe. Not the science, not the reality, not the facts. You must accept what they believe as science. You must accept what they believe as fact. Okay? No, you don't. We're not talking about persons getting pregnant. We're talking about women getting pregnant. Right? People have ovaries. It's that simple. It's that simple. Why do we have to debate this and go through this? Because these people are insane. And they control the biggest political party in the country. Soon not to be, but nonetheless it is. Most of America isn't buying this. But most of the media are. Go.
They have engaged in overreach, and it is the responsibility of the president and Congress to put the Supreme Court in check. Because
so the Supreme Court has engaged in overreach by saying we don't have power. And so here we have, what is she, 12 years old? I don't even know how old she is. With a zero experience with anything, going on and on about not just energy. She's at war with the Supreme Court of the United States. If you don't agree with them, they try to destroy you. If you have an institution, they try and destroy that. So they're trying to destroy the Supreme Court. They're trying to destroy the Electoral College. They're trying to destroy the state voting systems. They are destroying the southern border and immigration. They've destroyed women's sports by destroying Title IX an amendment to the 1965 Civil Rights Act. And that's what they're doing. And if you don't agree with them, you must be a right-wing white supremacist. Even if you're not white, it doesn't much matter. Ask those 3 Latina ladies who are running in Texas as Republicans who are now under attack by the New York Times and others. Go.
Delegitimize themselves.
What actions, would you like to see from your fellow lawmakers? Because the court's response to that might be, Alito specifically says, return this to the elected representatives of the people. He believes that that's where legitimacy, at least the issues of Roe, of abortion, should be returned to the people. What action would you like to see the Congress take?
I believe that President Biden should entertain expansion of the Supreme Court. I believe...
All right, so hold on a second. This court has conducted itself way outside its authority. So how should we fix it? Joe Biden should be a fascist. By executive order, he should expand the Supreme Court. This is what we're dealing with, a mushhead. We're going to expand the court. Yay! We're going to abort more babies. Yay! Wait. Yay! Go ahead.
We have the possibility, when we are strengthened by the repeal of the filibuster, or even the change to a talking filibuster or a standing filibuster, in doing so, we can codify Roe, we can codify, and all of the other cases that the Supreme Court indicated that they would threaten. We can codify same-sex marriage. We can codify the right to contraception.
Hello. Apparently, she's illiterate, too. The court majority specifically said, we're not addressing anything but this. Anything but this. You see, if Colbert wants to be a serious person, and he's not, he's got one of those Spock ears there. But if he wanted to be, he would say to her, let me ask you some tough questions. Is it a baby in the last week or is it not? Do you know what happens when there's partial birth abortion? What's your position on this? Do you think there should be any exceptions to abortion? None whatsoever? The other question's always asked, what about rape and incest? And so that's not a hard one for me. In other words, I think the effect on the woman would be very, very severe. Maybe I'm inconsistent, but that's the way it is. But I am really talking about extraordinarily rare circumstances. I'm not talking about this sort of thing, which is completely and utterly out of control.